Hey everyone, it is Wednesday afternoon. It means it's time for the office hours here on the ViaMonstra Academy. Today with a special guest, but this is where you can get updates on MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, a lot of Azure, a bit of PowerShell, MDT imaging, and of course ask questions on the same topics. So that being said, let's get this show on the road. All right. Hi again, everyone, and welcome, a special welcome to Mr. Richard Hicks joining us for the first time here on Office Hours. Glad to have you, Richard.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I could join you.
And of course, Andrew, good to see you again, sir.
As well.
Yeah. So since we have Richard here, tell me a little bit about what you are doing in our little space.
Absolutely. So thanks again for having me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Hicks. I'm the founder and principal consultant at Richard M. Hicks Consulting. As I joke, I tell people I came up with that name myself. Technically, maybe my parents did. I don't know. Anyway, I am an independent consultant, and I specialize broadly in two fields: enterprise mobility and security infrastructure. I work a lot with secure remote access technologies. Historically, that was things like traditional VPN and direct access. Recently, it's been moving towards always-on VPN and many of the third-party zero trust network solutions and things like that. But I also do a lot of work in the PKI space, and I think that's one of the things that'll be really compelling today to talk to your audience, is that there have been some changes in Microsoft Active Directory certificate services that impact your customers deploying certificates with Intune. I want to talk about that, maybe clear some of that up a little bit later. But so I do a lot of work with certificate services, deploying new PKI, doing upgrades. This year is going to be hopping for database migrations, because everybody's got servers still running on issuing CAs running on server 2012 and R2, and that's of course time's up for that this year. So people are doing migrations. I think it's middle of February. I've already done 3, but that's kind of where I focus on. And so secure remote access, digital certificates, those are kind of my swim lanes, if you will.
Yeah, and for those of you who have been attending our academy over the year and a half we've been running this, you have most likely stumbled across Richard also for his both the mini courses he has presented for us a few times now, but maybe also have seen his upcoming masterclass as a 4-day full day technical class on.
Yes.
Always on VPN, which
looking forward to that. Yes,
yeah,
that's a 4-day deep dive workshop, always on VPN front to back. So it'll include infrastructure, it'll include all of the deployment, everything that you need to know to deploy it in an enterprise. So it's going to be should be a good class.
Sounds good. But since you are the guest of honor here today, I figured in terms of updates, you get the honor to start.
That's great. So as we had mentioned before, and I certainly tweeted about earlier, might have picked a bad week to join you guys, because I'm assuming everybody wants to probably talk about some of the changes to Intune and delivering what is it, device drivers and things of that nature with Intune. But so anyway, I'll try not to steal too much of your time. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to, a common question that's coming up, and one of the reasons that kind of prompted me to jump on your show and spend some time with you, is that I keep getting this question quite often. So in May of 2022, Microsoft released an update as a part of that month's updates. It was a security update that affected ADCS, so Active Directory Certificate Services, and Active Directory domain controllers. Now, the update which came out was let's see if I have it's KB 5014754, and it is entitled Certificate-Based Authentication Changes on Windows Domain Controllers. So this is a combination of changes to Active Directory domain controllers, as well as online issuing CAs, or Active Directory Certificate Services servers. So to address some potential security risks. There were some ways that attackers were kind of abusing certificates, specifically those used that are issued with client authentication. And the importance of that is that any certificate with the client authentication EKU, or enhanced key usage application policy, can be presented to a domain controller for authentication by default. In other words, if you stand up an issuing CA, an Active Directory integrated CA in your Active Directory environment, automatically the certificates issued with client authentication from that CA are trusted and used for authentication. And they found that some attackers were kind of abusing some of the some of these certificates, and so they decided to kind of tighten up how these certificates were being validated. Specifically, what they're doing now is that with the May 2022 update, if you install this update on an issuing CA, it will now include, the certificate now includes a new field that includes a specific object identifier, and that field now maps the security identifier, the SID, of either the user or the device to which that client authentication certificate is issued. So when you present this certificate to a domain controller and the domain controller has been updated with the May 2022 update, by default, since the beginning of May, or when that May update was released, the domain controller will attempt to map the SID in that field to an account in Active Directory, and it performs some additional checks. So for example, not only does it make sure that this is a valid SID, right, and actually the account exists, it wants to make sure that the account did not exist before the certificate. I may have that backwards. It may be the certificate existed before the account. But it also wants to make sure, so it does some other checks as well. But bottom line is it's going to expect to be able to map those things to the SID to its object in AD. And if it does not, today, it just flags a warning. So in the event log, you will find that the authentication was accepted or processed, but there was no strong mapping present, okay? And so what Microsoft, the guidance that Microsoft gave us was that, hey, once these updates are out there, you need to update all of your, certificates issued by your ADCS servers and make sure they include the new OID. So any certificates that are out there need to be re-enrolled. So you'd have to update those existing certificates. And once that's all done and everything's happy, then you shouldn't see any more events in the event log, and you can turn on strong enforcement. Right now it's in compatibility mode, which basically means it's just going to log when there's a problem, but it will still allow the authentication. Now, Microsoft ultimately said, hey, we're going to give you 1 year, and in April of 2023, we're going to switch enforcement mode on for everyone. Awesome, great, that's fantastic. It gives us plenty of time to do this. The problem that we encountered immediately is that we noticed that this new object identifier, this new field in the certificate, it applies only to online templates. Now, online templates are certificate templates where you build the subject from Active Directory. Okay, so that means that when the device or the user enrolls for the certificate, they don't supply their own subject name. It's actually built from AD. So it looks at the user's UPN, or its common name, or its anyway, a lot of things that go into that. But bottom line is the user or the device doesn't supply that. It's built from Active Directory. That's called an online template. And this update will only apply this new field to online templates. So the first problem we noticed was that when you deploy certificates with Intune using PKCS or SCEP, those use an offline template. And an offline template is one in which the subject name is supplied in the request. So in those scenarios, since the user can supply their own subject name, we can't necessarily map this to an object or SID in Active Directory, so the field is not present. So what that meant was Microsoft is going to turn on the enforcement for this in April of 2023, And there's this huge gap because anybody who's using client authentication certificates, it could be for VPN access, it could be for Wi-Fi, it could be any number of things. That field is not present and will not be populated ever, right? Because they didn't build that. So there was this huge, uproar in the community, basically saying, "Hey, you're gonna give us a year. The clock is ticking, and you've given us nothing. And so what are we going to do?" So I was telling people, first of all, the most frustrating part is that Microsoft had kind of has been radio silent on this publicly. I've had customers open up support requests and get a little bit of information from support, but no one's communicated anything publicly. And I've extracted a bit of information here and there, and talking to some folks on Twitter where they say, "Oh yeah, well, it's like I'd spoken with somebody recently on Twitter that works for Microsoft and said, yeah, we are aware of the problem, we are aware of this gap, and we are working to address it." But that's it, and it's rather informal. It's not published, it's not documented. So then later, somebody had pointed out to me, "Hey, Microsoft updated the guidance on the KB to push the enforcement date out." And if you look at it, it's really interesting. It's fascinating because it says that the enforcement date now has been the change for full enforcement mode has been changed from May of 2023 to November of 2023 or later. And I looked at this and I thought, words mean things, right? Or later is very telling, right? The fact that they said or later tells me they probably don't have a high degree of confidence that they're going to get a solution out there prior to that November 2023 date. So what I'm telling my customers is, don't panic. I don't think Microsoft is going to leave us hanging here. They've got to fix this. There's way, way, way too many customers out there deploying client authentication certificates using Intune with PKCS or SCEP, and they can't possibly leave us hanging. Now, that being said, there are some community solutions. There are some third-party solutions for this. There's one of them is a publicly available. Another one should be available soon, so I can't really comment about that one. But there are third-party solutions. The caveat there is that, of course, you're talking about installing open source software on a control plane asset, a tier 0 asset in your environment. Probably your security people are probably not going to be real thrilled with that. So my enterprise customers have had no interest in that. They said, no, this solution has to come from Microsoft. So Microsoft will probably have to build a policy, a policy module for ADCS. And it can be done because, there's been a couple of different third parties who've done this open source. So it's possible to do, just Microsoft just hasn't done it. And of course, this scenario affects ADCS, but if you're using certificates for things like smart cards, oftentimes smart cards are issued with an offline template, meaning your subject name is supplied in the request. There's a variety of other things that could come up and bite people, but the biggest one, specifically for the audience here today, is Intune certificates with with PKCS or SCEP fall under that category of offline templates. And so today, those are you're kind of left high and dry. So don't panic. I think Microsoft's going to fix this at some point. But right now, you're just going to have to ride it out.
All right. Thank you for that update. Fantastic information. Andrew, what's going on in your part of the world?
I feel like it's been a very busy week. So I've basically got a list of things that I have glanced at here and there, but I've got they're all a list of items that I'm planning on reading through and watching over the next couple of days. So if you don't mind sharing my screen,
I should be able to grant you that access.
All right.
Click. There we go.
Thank you, sir. So Mattias Melkersen over at MSEndpointMgr has been putting out quite a few videos recently surrounding PSADT, or the PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. And I saw one yesterday that he released with Chris Gerke as a guest, surrounding how you can work more efficiently with VSCode, PSADT, and GIT. And anytime these sort of DevOps-ish for lack of a better term, topics pop up in our little part of the world, I'm always excited to see them and see what people are doing in this space, sort of outside of real infrastructure DevOps that you normally hear about. So this is top of my list to watch here over the next couple of days. Michael Niehaus released a blog post yesterday on simplifying the process of generating an Azure AD bulk enrollment provisioning package. I know this is sort of along the lines of a blog post that you did as well, Johan, on a plan B for autopilot, where sort of reverse engineering the process for building out the bulk enrollment token and just making that a little bit easier rather than going through the imaging and configuration designer, which is pretty cool. Again, this topic actually seems to be coming up more frequently for us. I think we just touched on it in our Intune class earlier this week, bulk enrollment, and people are wanting to do this. So any way that we can make that process more streamlined, I think is a good thing. Let's see here. We have Gary Blok released an article 2 days ago on Monday on how to inventory BIOS settings for HP devices using hardware inventory in ConfigMgr. So this was pretty cool. He does mention in his lab, it's not too bad, but that you might have some significant storage increases when you start putting this data into hardware inventory. But this looked pretty cool to me. And then one more thing on the community side, and then I had something from Microsoft. Nickolaj Andersen released version 1.4 of his Intune Win32 app module. So a few fixes there, some new functions added to his PowerShell functions. So I thought that was a pretty big deal. And then before you take us to the very, very big news from Microsoft this week in our little part of the world, I did come across two articles that were gaining quite a bit of traction this week, that in Windows 11 22H2 and .NET in Windows 11 22H2 will be utilizing the unified update platform a little bit more now. So as I understand that will have a smaller download size for updates and a couple of other improvements. So I hope that this is successful. Any improvements in the patching process on the Windows side, I am absolutely happy to hear. So those were just a few of the things I came across this week. But I know, as Richard and I have already hinted to a little bit, Johan, you've got some major community news that has flooded our feeds for the last couple of days here.
Indeed. Just a few, he says, by the way, and then he gives us a list like 10 items. But yeah, I do have, I want to bring up, not that screen, but this screen here. Microsoft did had an announcement about the first milestone being already publicly available for the driver and firmware servicing service they have been working on for a good 2.5 years by now. Please note that this is only plumbing foundation. There is no user interface in Intune and anything like that just yet. If you want to play around with it now, my recommendation is for today, wait just a little bit, because I've seen 3 ports now already where people try to enable it in tenants, and either that tenant stops showing devices after a while, or it simply won't work to enable it. So give this a few days so they can sort out any possible issues there. One report I saw was a gentleman where he had 2 tenants. It worked in one and did not work in the other, and they were on the same service release. So first release, I wouldn't say pre-alpha code or anything, but it's early. So anyhow, when you scroll through this article, and we will share the links as usual, you scroll down at the bottom past the videos that I also recommend viewing. This is what they mention here, that they currently offer an application that you can download to do this or configure this in your environment. So it's up on GitHub. You can get it from here. And then also David Brook wrote together, published yesterday, a very good post on this as well, or I guess early morning my time. It takes you through what you need to configure, permissions, etc., to work with this. So we will share that link as well. Fantastic job. Once this becomes fully available, I'm super excited to see how it can be leveraged, and we'll start to do testing. Have a bunch of hardware basically sitting over there waiting to be patched, and BIOS and TPM firmware upgraded, and I'll see how that plays out. So at least 10 different hardware models that I've been able to collect for this very purpose. So look out for more information as the days and especially the weekend come by here. I have a lab tenant I'm not afraid to try upgrading on, so we'll see. Yeah.
Looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. We have a few questions coming in, and good people saying shout out and hi to Richard, so that is awesome. George was asking about the recording. This feed is live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So the minute we're done, it's available for playback. I usually recommend the YouTube channel because that's one that's the easiest to access. So this one here, YouTube, ViaMonstra Online Academy. Apparently there is a live event going on of sorts here. That's where you catch the recording, so easy enough. So, Andrew, are there any questions for Richard in the list?
Yes.
I see a couple.
Yeah, so let's start here. What is Richard's advice on the best guide, book, or reference designed for a PKI 2-tier setup?
Very good question. And the answer to that is Brian Komar's PKI book, or Active Directory Certificate Services book, from many, many years ago. There hasn't been a ton of changes, at least architecturally. I mean, there's been some new features and things added to ADCS over the years, but it's a pretty stable platform, right? So there hasn't been a lot of changes over the last few years, and they're minor. But most of the theory about offline root, two-tier CA, two-tier hierarchy, right? Offline root, online issuing CA, redundancy, web responders, OCSP, all of that good stuff is really covered thoroughly in Brian Komar's book, and I forget the name of it. Let me actually check here. Windows Server 2008 PKI and Certificate Security is the name of the book. It's an A-Press book. I have no idea if it's still in print. You probably can find a used one at your favorite online reseller, but it is still honestly the best book and the most comprehensive book for setting up PKI today. So, and again, don't let the 2008 scare you too much. All of the principles in the book still apply even today, with if you're building a new CA or a new PKI hierarchy with Server 22 and 2022. All of the principles in the book would still be applicable today. So that's what I'd recommend.
I can only agree. Brian is an absolute legend in the area. So I remember seeing his tech ed sessions back in the days, Fortnite even.
Yep.
So yeah, good stuff.
All right. We got another question on YouTube. Is the Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise channel update, is that a device-based setting or user-based setting? And I actually do not know off the top of my head, but I would expect it to be a device-based setting, I think. Trying to think of where that registry key is, because I just came across it recently.
Yeah, nothing that rings a bell either. But I would like to agree with you on the device one. That would be my bet.
Yeah, I'm almost positive it was in the HKLM Hive. Specifically for, M365 apps. Yep, it looks like Matt actually had a follow-up comment. Yes, it's device setting. Right, good deal. Let's see here. Matt with the reminder to follow up on a request from last week.
Which was a request from the previous week, I believe, that I elegantly ditched and passed over to you.
That's right. That's all right. Yeah, I can take that right now, actually.
All right, no, sounds good to me.
So, hopefully I am recalling the task correctly. It was regarding the patch compliance report that Jonas Ohmsen from Microsoft put together. So this is a great set of patch compliance reports for ConfigMgr. I really like this solution because it comes with it's very easy to install. Comes with several reports, helps you dive in deep. And his blog post here even has recommendations for even more robust solutions, including Power BI solutions if you are a Microsoft Premier customer. I have seen some of these, and they're pretty darn good, though I believe there are several community solutions that will get you 90% of the way there. But if you are Premier and you've got the hours that you need to use, these are useful solutions. So I'll be sure to share this link, but I do have this installed on my site server over here in my lab. So if I go over to reports and custom, I believe this is the one that I want here. Let me see if this is it. Oh, no, here it is. Sorry. So if we just look at the update compliance overview, never mind if things are compliant or not. This lab I try to keep in some level of disarray to actually do these demos. A lot of disarray considering Patch Tuesday was yesterday, I suppose. But here, if we just look at the overview page, you can see we have a high-level view of just our overall update compliance, the number of updates we've approved, when the last roll-up was installed, which would have been last month, the current roll-up, which is this month. So these sort of these reports also update on their own. I didn't have to do anything to go in here and say the current roll-up is February 2023. Pending reboots, this is something that's incredibly important to watch out for when you're looking at patch compliance, because you're not going to be compliant until your devices have rebooted. Scan errors, install errors, that sort of thing. And then as we scroll down here, then we can start to dive into the data on the specific devices. So I can look at CM01 here. If I click on this, it will tell me exactly which updates are missing at the moment, whether they're deployed or not. We can change our filters here to say only deployed updates. If we go back, there's a lot of filtering that happens up here. So just for example, by default, we are excluding definitions and Defender engine updates and that sort of thing. We're excluding available updates. Only required updates are showing up here. So this is a really useful report. If you don't have anything else, I would say implement this in your environment, upload these reports to your site server or your reporting services point, and you'll get a pretty good return on investment right off the bat. I mean, it only takes a few minutes to get this thing installed, so I've had a lot of luck with it so far.
All right, awesome, thank you. And it's quite funny coincidence. I was playing around earlier today with tracking some reboot times, or rather the lack of it. So I was playing around with SQL a bit in ConfigMgr in this case, where there is a view that you can ask for. Basically, will show you the different reboot events that machines may be into, or a client state. So that is basically what you will see in the console here, where the devices have a pending restart or not, and what particular restart that was causing them. So planning to release this in a blog shortly. I was just, as I mentioned, doing this earlier this morning. But if I run this one here, it of course show me the devices that have a different client state. I was correlating that with information that is available in this view here. I wanted to also show some other timestamps and whatnot. And then also from the live view, where you get things like last online time, last offline time, etc. The reason I wanted this one, because I wanted the last boot up time to figure out, okay, how long has it been since they actually rebooted? It's not just that they have a pending restart. If it's been like that for 3 months, it's not entirely ideal, because it means that whatever patch that were installed, it's not yet installed. It's just almost there. So anyway, I put this and I smacked it into a PowerShell script that I put together. So the very same query here, client state is different from 0. Didn't do the join yet here, but I can copy and paste that query. But then I added in a table, so I will look up, okay, what value shows up in the different things. So if I run these here, lines of code, and then check that array in the end, I would at least tell me what devices I have that have a reboot pending and why they have a reboot pending. So as soon as I get this other information here, I will also be able to tell, okay, the uptime, giving me an indication on how bad this is. So yeah, sidebar. Total sense.
Oh, that is awesome. That's a cool solution.
PowerShell is king, I'm telling you.
That's right.
All right. There was a always on VPN question from Chris. Not entirely sure we covered that one yet. Talking of Windows 11 news, do you see that question, Richard?
Yes, I do. So Chris is alluding to a known issue, a bug in Windows 11 with WMI. There is a bug in Windows 11 specifically with enumerating one of the WMI namespaces for Always On VPN or for VPN profiles that is causing problems for it. It initially surfaced by some of my tools that I use are broken, right? So if you, for example, I have a PowerShell module called AOVPNTools that I use. It's publicly available. You can get it from the PowerShell gallery. And a couple of the tools that I use make calls to this WMI, and all of a sudden I was getting people telling me they were broken. And I started going back and doing my troubleshooting, and panic was, oh, Microsoft changed something. Now I have to go rewrite my tools. And in debugging process, I realized, no, I'm just trying to do something very simple here, and it's bombing out, but it's fine on Windows 10. So I had some of my professional PowerShell people look at it too, and they said, oh yeah, this looks like a bug. So had one of my larger customers open a support case. Sure enough, anyway, bottom line is they were supposed to fix this. They have fixed it. I tested a private fix for it last year, and they said, yep, everything looks good. We're going to release it in, I think it was September of 2022. And it never showed up. And so, they said, yeah, we had to push it back till October. And then it never showed up in October. And then they said, yeah, we're pushing it off until next year now because it's end of the year. So they told us in October of last year, target is February 2023. So usually those are 2C updates, right? So it'll be the third week of February. So I expect this to drop next week. I have not heard anything different, but they've pushed it back several times already, so it's always possible. So fingers crossed. It is. They did fix it. I have the private fix. As a matter of fact, I think it's fixed in the insider build. So at some point, they got to push this to production, if you will. So I'm hoping that that's going to be fixed this month. So fingers crossed. Watch for your updates next week.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm assuming this was the module you were referring to?
That is correct, yes.
All right, so it's up on the gallery. It's also here on the...
And we have that on GitHub, as well. Yeah. And this is basically just a set of tools that I use when I'm implementing and configuring always on VPN for my customers. I originally put it in the PowerShell gallery mostly just because it was more convenient for me when I'm working with my customers, but everyone else is free to use them. There's a lot of great tools in there. And so, and I refer to them certainly in my talks and in my training and things like that, but there's a lot of good things in there that your audience may find helpful. So.
Awesome. Great stuff.
And by the way, while we're on the subject of Windows 11, there is a known issue with Windows 11. I don't know if anybody asked about it yet. I'm scrolling up here. I don't see it, but I'll throw it out here anyway because this has come up as well. Microsoft is aware of a known issue with Windows 11 where a device sync forces the removal and replacement of always-on VPN profiles every time, even if there's no changes. So this manifests itself as customers complaining that they're getting kicked out of applications, right? Originally, it came to me with one of my customers to do some troubleshooting as, hey, our connections keep dropping. And, that happens, right? Underlying internet connectivity loss, you move from one AP to another. If you're using an interactive session like an RDP or SSH or something like that, that might be really sensitive to connection loss, it's really impactful to the user. As we started troubleshooting it, we realized when the problem happened, it happened on a device sync, and the connections would just drop. The profiles would be removed and re-replaced. And so we started doing some troubleshooting, digging into SyncML and looking at everything. And sure enough, every time the device syncs, it removes the VPN profiles and recreates them, right? So obviously they drop because when it removes them, they have to terminate. And so this happened in Windows 11, and it is a known issue. It is still a problem today. Microsoft is aware of it, is supposedly working on it. I don't know when that fix is coming out, but yeah, for Windows 11 right now. And what's interesting, it doesn't seem to be happening to everybody, but it happens to quite a few. It happens when you deploy using the native Intune UI. So if you're using the VPN template, device configuration template, it will happen. If you're using custom XML, so if you're using a custom template and uploading your own XML, it happens there. Terribly frustrating. So I don't know when that fix is coming, but hopefully soon.
All right. Thank you for the insight. Great stuff.
All right. Matt had a question on YouTube. We have Microsoft Visio deployed to all devices as part of an image, but not all devices have the license for it. Now we have to find out which devices have a license so we can remove it from the ones that don't. The question is how to find those using SCCM, CM pivot, targeting a file, registry key. Any ideas on that?
I mean, that's typically used for a little bit of license reconciliation reporting in ConfigMgr, where you can see usage. Of course, you can combine with software metering and other things. You can actually check which people are actively using it, may be installed, but they may not use it. I have something I can share. It's not on Visio, but it's close. So here in my ConfigMgr environment, I have uploaded, or show me this first. I have a list of licenses that I have purchased. So I have a little Excel spreadsheet where I simply maintain, for the sake of demos in this case, basically the quantity and what version and whatnot that I paid for. I even threw in a 7-zip license, which is obviously free, but I did it because I happen to have an installation with that one on a few devices, so I figured I can use that one. But anyhow, if I go back to my ConfigMgr environment, head over to assets and compliance, this is where I can go ahead and import a software license. In this case, I'm going to import a generic license file that I created, and I'm going to browse to it. And I have to do it through the UNC path, otherwise it's going to whine. So I'm going to go up here a few folders, asset intelligence, licenses, version, and I will now import that information into ConfigMgr. So ConfigMgr knows what I've been buying, because otherwise it wouldn't. ConfigMgr knows what I had installed because it has done it. It has done the inventory. So also what I've done here in Asset Intelligence is I have configured some of the classes that are not enabled by default. And when you hover over one of these classes, it will show you which reports that becomes available depending on which class you select. And in this case, I'm interested in this particular class here, or the report here. So that means, long story short, I can head over to monitoring, find my reports, and there is, of course, a separate node for asset intelligence reports here, and I search for the 115A, and I can run that report. And this one will tell me to specify collection. I will just do all systems. It's perfectly okay in a lab. Not entirely recommended in production, depending on your size. But I'll view the report, and it will tell me shortly that, all right, I'm clearly over-licensed on 7-zip because I bought 7 and I only installed 1. So, of course, there is a difference of 6 here. So this is, I'll say, a good use of that type of information. But I mean, any way you want to query for stuff, there was a question earlier when we talked about that device setting for 365 apps. It was a registry key. You can use CMPivot for stuff like that if you're interested. I don't have one for the office, but I have one for some other registry keys I frequently watch, just because you can. Let me see what I have. Here I have a few devices that will work. So I run a CMPivot query, and there is a ready-made feature or entity for registry that you can ask for registry keys. So here I have my favorites and the settings. So this is asking for a specific registry key, and I will run it, and in real time I'll go ahead and ask those clients for that particular key. So that's something you can do in Intune as well. If you have tenant attached, you can do the same thing. Of course, it's going to be a different key if you manage it through Intune. This policy comes down from Active Directory. Intune would have them in a policy manager node, but I think you get the idea. You can very quickly ask for registry settings this way also. So many different options. All right, what else?
Let's see. We had a follow-up on the book that you mentioned, Richard. It looks like the first link to buy that book used was 173 pounds. So hopefully with a little bit of hunting, they can find that one.
Good times. I'm gonna start. I may have to look out at more stores on that. See if I can sell some of those copies, huh?
Yeah, we make some good money there. PKI book. I mean, here is one for a mere 89. I mean, half price.
Yeah, there we go.
But Yeah.
So let's see. We had a question coming in on LinkedIn that I was trying to find an answer for, but I think it would require a little bit more testing. I was wondering if you knew of a way to set the home page or start page for Edge during autopilot, but still give the user the option to change it. I've tried it via Intune configuration profile, but it locks down the option for the user to actually change it after the fact. I've tried using PowerShell, but that still locks it down. And during imaging, they were able to do this, but now moving away from that, it looks like it is a challenge. So I don't know if you've run across that at all, Johan, or Richard, for that matter.
I can't say I have. Maybe running a script in the user context and just flip it into profile and hoping that that will allow them to override the settings. So it's not a policy, but just a setting there. But no, I haven't tried. If anyone watching this have done something like that, please let us know. We'll be happy to share it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we will have to take that as a bit of a homework.
That's all right. We like homework. Sometimes. Another comment on LinkedIn about always on VPN. I don't know if you saw that one, Richard. Windows 11 and always on VPN has the issue where, remember, Windows login credentials is grayed out.
Oh, yes. Yes. I've had a few people bring this to my attention. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but yeah, there's a somehow the setting for that is grayed out. Now, typically when we deploy always on VPN, we are using certificate authentication. So we actually don't want to set that setting. So it may not be super impactful. It just really depends on how you're deploying always on VPN. If you're using MS Chat v2 and you want, you want that feature, obviously it's going to be problematic, but I don't recommend using MS Chat v2. It's always better to use certificates. So it doesn't affect me, I guess, because I don't need that setting anyway. But for those corner cases where you do, it might be problematic. But not sure why. That's a question for Microsoft. So we'll have to probably raise a support case to get some eyes on that.
All right.
So I think for the moment we are caught up, but we do still have 10 minutes.
Yeah. Any questions out there, especially since we have Richard joining us today? If you have any,
shout out to David Segura there too. How's it going, David? Because that's the first thing I thought was, whoa, David Segura.
That's right. I saw David was announced as an MMS speaker
yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Congrats, David. Awesome. Good to see you.
Great.
Good to see you in May.
Absolutely.
Had a whole mess of announcements of speakers over the last 3 days.
Saw that, yeah. For those of you who have been selected as speakers, did they tell you what sessions you're actually presenting yet? I haven't got that, so.
I know one session.
Yeah, that's good. Good. So yeah, I haven't heard back from anybody there yet regarding that. So I'm like, well, they'll tell me at some point which ones they want me to deliver. So
you should hope so, right?
Yeah, I forgot when the deadline for the slides were, but I'm assuming they will let us know before that.
There you go. Let's hope so. Let's hope so. I'll just send them my slides from last year.
Wait, this is live in public, Richard. Wait.
Right.
All right.
Let's hope Greg doesn't listen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Don't mind us, Greg.
Just running with you, man.
All right, we've got a couple of things that have come in here. We buy PCs with the Dell Ready image and it works fine. We're trying to find a process to handle the reimage. We're in hybrid Azure AD join. Don't have MDT or ConfigMgr OSD at this point. Any recommendations?
So basically wanted to re-image device if needed from basically a factory image. I mean, if a reset doesn't cut it, then it has to be some sort of either on-premises deployment solution or a cloud imaging solution that will allow you to do that. And Kylo here apparently got excited to talk about cloud imaging, but yeah, that would have to be the method. If you want to join legacy Active Directory during imaging, you better have a traditional deployment method for it. If you're okay with autopilot and all that complexity, that's another option. But for autopilot to work, someone needs to put Windows on that box. So a little bit of catch-22 there.
All right. And then Matt was also asking on YouTube, let's see, when the ConfigMgr client installed on some devices but not on other devices, what could be some of the reasons for that to happen?
I mean, that depends on how you deploy clients. Some customers try the site-wide client push and realizing that was probably not the best option, and instead they will go for a startup script of sort using a group policy just to catch those devices that are supposed to have a client but doesn't, or have their own version of it. It pretty much ties into client health that we've been. Good lord! Apparently, this dog does not want me to show you this, but.
He says nobody's paid attention to me for the last 2 minutes.
Right.
Look at me.
Exactly. Yeah, I did let them out before the event just to have that taken. Let's see, holistic here. So the very concept of implementing something that help you track client health, that is a key to any ConfigMgr environment. And there are many community solutions out there. For example, one that is pretty common is the one from Redland, been around for many years. This one, it also helps you with things like that. There's some public offer from Microsoft as well that you can, if you have a lot of money extra, you can go for that one. Jason Sandys otherwise have the by far most common and best startup script there is, and his script is in the tools folder. Don't ask me why, but here it is. It's been around for a good decade, and this is what we typically use. Like 99 out of 100 customers have something like this implemented that will making sure that clients gets installed through it. So highly recommended. Yep, that's my take on that, at least.
Good stuff. Not sure if Kylo agrees with you or not. Can't really tell.
Now he seems a little bit like, maybe it'll be a good idea. Any other questions out there?
Nothing at the moment, but we've still got 4 minutes down to it.
Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in the queue. So, Andrew, Richard, thank you so much for joining, and
Thanks so much.
it's been a pleasure having you here.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. Hope to join you guys again someday soon.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll get going. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Cheers.